Welcome to the Greenfield Report with Henry R. Greenfield, your gateway to understanding today's geopolitical landscape. With 50 years of experience across 10 countries, Henry shares expert insights on world affairs, offering practical solutions and engaging guest perspectives. Dive into the Greenfield Report for lively discussions on the issues that matter.
This is Henry R. Greenfield with the Greenfield Report. While events continue to swirl around the globe, especially on the economic side and how they have become interrelated with security, there is an issue that simply is inextricably tied to it all, and that is nuclear bombs, nuclear proliferation, and nuclear disarmament. How this comes together as a global phenomena will be the subject of the next two episodes of the Greenfield Report. Today in part one, we will explore the European side of the equation as we await the back and forth between Trump and Putin on Ukraine, as Putin seems to be in no mood to take any ceasefire proposal seriously. While there are complex historical pieces, there are currently two factors that we need to keep in mind when we think of the future of defense in Europe against the Russians. First, there are conventional military forces, which is where Europe is moving towards with an investment, now get this, of up to 1 trillion euros or more over the next few years. And the other side is the U.S. nuclear umbrella, which covers not only Europe through NATO and beyond, but in fact, the entire world. No other country than the United States has the reach or capability to deploy nuclear or conventional weapons on land, sea, and in the air like the U.S. Europe is responding to the challenge of Trump's new Fortress America and the resulting of what is the future of NATO crisis, meaning not knowing the future role of the U.S. on the continent by investing, as we noted, heavily in conventional arms and defense. Every country is involved, and with German participation high, along with changing its constitution to take on more debt, Europe is moving forward. Within a relatively short time, I would say 5 years, maybe even less, Europe will be able to outclass Russia and anything that Russia might try against various countries in what is now NATO. Without, and this is the key, without the assistance or participation of conventional U.S. military resources. However, as we shall see as we speak to an expert in this field, when it comes to the nuclear umbrella of the United States, America continues to hold, as Trump would put it, the cards that are driving decisions around the world. Just today, for instance, Trump enticed TSMC from Taiwan, the producer of 90% of the world's highest speed chips, to invest $100 billion more on top of the already $60 billion that Biden extracted from them to produce in the United States. We will discuss this and Israel as the mini superpower in the Middle East. And also today, as part two of our nuclear series, they also made a power move to break up Syria into autonomous regions. None of this could happen without the Trump doctrine of using nuclear weapons as the ultimate trump card in controlling key areas of the globe. As part of our ongoing understanding on the changing and evolving situation between the United States and various hotspots around the world, where nuclear weapons continue to be a consideration, we have reached out to select experts in the field of nuclear disarmament and nuclear proliferation. As our audience is well aware, this is a complex subject that needs to be broken down in an overall direction, as well as specific instances and potential flashpoints. Today, we are proud to speak with Marc Finaud, one of the foremost experts in this field, and we are very pleased to have him on the Greenfield Report to give us some insights on several aspects which we wish to discuss. But first, we'd like to give you a little bit of background on who is Marc. Marc Finaud is a former French diplomat who has been located in Switzerland for the past 20 years, providing expertise with various international organizations on arms control and more specifically, nuclear arms. During his 36-year career as a diplomat from 1977 to 2013, he served in several bilateral postings in the Soviet Union, Poland, Israel, and Australia, as well in multilateral missions to the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe the Conference on Disarmament in the United Nations. He holds a master's degree in international law and political science. He is also a senior resident fellow for the WMD program at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, and he was there between 2013 and 2015. Without further ado, Marc, welcome to the Greenfield Report.
Thank you very much, Robert. Nice to be with you.
Thank you. So, Marc, if you don't mind, we're going to jump right in, and we'd like to go to the questions that our listeners have provided us with in several areas and questions to discuss. So, Marc, the way we'd like to do this is I'll just give you a question, and you speak as long as you like about this subject because you're the expert, okay?
Thank you. That's very dangerous.
So the first question, which is the foremost question right now in the world on nuclear weapons and nuclear armaments is, can Europe replace the United States nuclear umbrella? Why or why not?
Yeah, it's interesting, of course, that this question is being raised now. Of course, the second Trump administration, this statement, this almost alliance with Putin raises this question. Of course, it's not completely new since, of course, during Trump's first term, there were questions about the reliability and the credibility of Trump's, the United States support for Europe's security, for NATO, including extended nuclear deterrence. And there were questions asked, and the answers were not always clear. Now, of course, these fears are increasing, but at the same time, it's not absolutely sure that we're heading towards this completely new situation. First, because the United States is still a member of NATO, so is bound by the North Atlantic Treaty, and has been committing to support European security for many years, and because this was not done out of philanthropy or generosity. This is also because the security of the United States depends on this alliance. By the way, perhaps just a short parenthesis, maybe American audience perhaps forgot this, but the only time in history when Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty was triggered, that means assistance in case one member is attacked, this was when the United States was victim of the 9/11 attack, and European countries provided a lot of assistance in the United States, but of course also in the Afghan wars and the Iraqi wars, supporting the United States because they felt that this was part of this solidarity on which the alliance is based. Now, the question about nuclear umbrella, I think, is a little bit theoretical and certainly needs a deep discussion and a real dialogue, not only among experts, but also including civil society, parliamentarians, the media, because after all, this idea of potential use of nuclear weapons, if it ever happened one way or another, obviously we would be the victims, people, the population. You can imagine the figures of any use of nuclear weapons. We're talking about millions or hundreds of millions of victims throughout the world, not even mentioning the environmental catastrophe and nuclear winter, world famine, etc. So that means that we need to be able to have this our say, droit de regard on this issue.
So, Marc, just to take a step back, if we could, for a second. So, first of all, as a typical European, thanks a lot for reminding the Americans about the only time Article 5 was used. But now that you brought it up, What is your view on the future of NATO, meaning remaining as a nuclear shield and allowing the conventional forces to replace NATO with European-only troops?
Yes, well, of course, the scenario, the worst case scenario of the U.S. withdrawing from NATO and abandoning Europe to its own fate is still hypothetical.
The question I'm trying to ask, and maybe I didn't ask it very well, Marc, is that do you see any possibility where the U.S. would still keep the nuclear shield, but allow Europe to basically do all the conventional forces?
Well, actually, when you read the statements from NATO, the doctrine, there is a combination of both so-called conventional deterrence and nuclear deterrence, to which, of course, the United States is the major contributor, but to which also the nuclear forces of the UK and France are considered as contributing to this overall deterrence. Now, the question is, again, whether this so-called nuclear umbrella is really an umbrella, and whether it is not just a means of reassuring allies, and whether it is really credible and reliable. Now, of course, most NATO countries that don't have nuclear weapons have relied on this, have believed that the US would come to their rescue and possibly use nuclear weapons in case of attack on Europe. But there was never any absolute guarantee that this would be the case, because the question was always sort of pending: would the United States president risk the vitrification, the eradication of New York or San Francisco in case Berlin or Warsaw was attacked?
Yeah, let me just ask about that. Okay, so let's just take this in a couple parts. So I hear what you're saying. So you're saying that that's never been tested. Okay, I got it, right? But staying with the European side, just yesterday, how do you view the Polish president's demand to go nuclear with French nuclear weapons? Is this provocative? Can he succeed with that? In other words, to break away from the U.S. nuclear umbrella to have, let's say, a sub-umbrella with possibly, let's say, the U.S. with its very vast nuclear armaments to still be there, but then begin to rely on France?
Yes, of course, one has to keep in mind, first of all, that the conventional forces of NATO altogether, including, of course, the US, is, far superior as what Russia has. And by the way, it has lost a lot in this Ukraine war. And this is the reason why Russia has actually built up its nuclear arsenal to compensate for this inferiority, this imbalance. Second, again, if you take the whole economic wealth and strength of European countries and their military forces, assets in manpower, equipment, etc., far more superior than Russia. But of course, there is always this risk that Russia, being an aggressive country, as it has demonstrated, actually more to actually reconstitute its former empire, the Russian and Soviet Empire, targeting mostly former Soviet countries like Georgia or Moldova and then Ukraine. The risk, of course, is real that it could cross the border of NATO and attack NATO countries. But at the same time, there is high confidence that such an attack could be deterred. Now, would it be deterred only with conventional weapons or nuclear weapons? I guess now it is in the interest of everyone to maintain this ambiguity. Now, obviously, the risk is higher of any use of nuclear weapons by any side, because of the humanitarian devastating consequences, and it wouldn't make sense for Poland to host or to possess nuclear weapons to use them against its neighbor, and because the fallout, the consequences would be destructive also on Poland. So,
well, Marc, let's go right into that moment, okay? Because this is really the crux of it to me. Poland. Poland has got a very large military presence. Poland has over 4% of its GDP. So, they're well on their way to meeting any kind of thing that Trump would ask of them. But Poland is also on the front line. Poland has a history of being overrun by both Germany as well as the Russian and then Soviets. So do you think that if Poland had that option, in other words, not trying to pull the Article 5 card, but actually saying, using the Trump metaphor of cards, if Poland just had that card of like, hey, you're crossed into our territory, whether it's via Belarus or whatever way that Russians were threatening Poland, would they use nuclear weapons to defend themselves, in your view?
yes, I guess it's, I served in Poland. I know Polish people very well, and they're still, traumatized by the First World War, which resulted in a pact, in a treaty, an alliance between Stalin and Hitler. And France had an alliance with Poland, but at the same time in France, everybody was saying, who is going to die for Danzig? And, this is the whole. And of course, the Poles are still, very, have this resentment about lack of support, even if of course France and Britain entered the war immediately. But now the question remains about the credibility, and just as de Gaulle didn't have any total trust in nuclear umbrella from the United States, and that's why he developed French national arsenal. The same question could be asked: Is France, is a French president, are French people ready to be wiped out by a nuclear response from Russia in case they use a nuclear weapon in response to an attack against one of their allies?
I'll put my 2 cents in on this, even though this is an interview. My view is, Marc, also having studied history, although I haven't lived in Poland, my view is that the Poles will not allow themselves to be overrun ever again. I personally believe that they would rather go down than allow that to happen. The trauma that you speak of is a trauma built into their DNA now. It's not a one-off. It is something that they've experienced for hundreds of years. And I think that they feel strong enough now that they're not going to let that happen. What do you think?
Yes, you're right. But they, as you said, they've built their conventional capability, and obviously they would receive assistance, just like Ukraine has received assistance. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to cross the threshold and actually start proliferating. First, because it's against all the treaties that Poland and other countries have signed, the non-proliferation treaty, and also because the situation would not be safer. On the contrary, the more actors you have with nuclear weapons, the higher the risk is that these weapons will be used, and again, everybody would suffer from that. So in this respect, I think the purpose, the action now should be, and this is done by about 100 countries that have signed the treaty making nuclear weapons illegal, to join this fight and act, put pressure on Russia and the US with the largest arsenals to reduce and eliminate these weapons. And actually, Trump made some interesting comments on that, which in my view now needs to be followed up.
So, Marc, moving on to another area of this, as we all know, Europe's economic engine has been and is Germany, and it looks like with the new chancellor that's coming in that they're going to start investing again in defense. So how do Europeans, in your view, feel about Germany rearming, given its 20th century history? And do you think that they will try to get more separate nuclear protection outside the US umbrella, meaning France or a combination of France and the UK?
Yes, of course, this is a logical debate in the current circumstances. I'm not sure there is already consensus, an agreement in Germany for dramatically changing the status of Germany. Increasing military budget is one thing, and obviously, as we can see, this is not something you can do just overnight and have immediate results. Secondly, in this area, there is a need for more cooperation between European countries, including France and the UK, but not necessarily on nuclear weapons. And finally, if you look at all the polls, the opinion surveys in Germany, the majority of people are still, I wouldn't say pacifist, but they are more, I would say they're certainly not inclined to become a military superpower and even less a nuclear power, because there is really strong resistance, including to civilian nuclear power, as you know.
Well, we've been speaking with Marc Finaud. This ends part one of our interview. Part two, we're going to discuss nuclear weapons in the rest of the world. So thank you, Marc, and we will be back with part two.
Thank you for joining us on the Greenfield Report with Henry R. Greenfield. We hope today's insights into the ever-shifting geopolitical landscape have sparked your curiosity and broadened your perspective. Stay connected with us for more in-depth discussions and expert solutions. Until next time, keep exploring the world beyond the headlines.